everybody. My name is Madison Grant, and today I'll be covering Chapter 7 of Listening, and more specifically, the common barriers to effective listening. To begin, listening is defined as the process of making meaning out of another person's spoken message. So this means that listening is always an active process. You have to make yourself listen. And this also means that two people or many people could be listening to the same message but construct two different meanings out of it, which means that someone is listening differently than the other. This goes into the 10 terms or concepts to common barriers of effective listening. This includes noise, pseudo-listening, selective attention, information overload, glazing over, rebuttal tendency, closed-mindedness, competitive interrupting, confirmation, bias, and vividness effect. To begin, noise is anything that distracts you from listening to what you wish to listen to. So this could be an internal noise or an external noise. An internal noise is anything that's going on within yourself. So an example of this is you're anxious for a test, and so it's hard for you to listen to the person talking to you because all you're thinking about is your test that's coming up next week, and so the anxiety within it is all you can think about, so you're not thinking about the message being spoken to you. An external noise is anything going around you. So an example that MJ used in his previous lecture is if you're at the bar and you're trying to talk to someone that you like, and the bar is so loud, there's really loud music playing, there's people talking everywhere, it's hard to listen to the message being spoken to you. The next term is pseudo-listening, and this is using feedback behaviors to give the false impression that one is listening. So it's pretending to pay attention to someone when you weren't really listening. So I think everyone can kind of relate to this when it comes to listening to a really long lecture that your professor is giving, and you're sitting there pretending that you're listening, but you're kind of zoning out in a way or not fully listening to everything that he has to say. The next term is selective attention, and this is listening only to what you want to hear and ignoring the rest. And engaging in selective attention, you're listening to some parts of a person's message and pseudo-listening to the other parts. So an example of this, last week, my younger sister, she's 7, she came home and she said that a boy likes her and she really likes them. But she listened to the part that they liked her. She didn't listen to the part that he said, "I like you as a friend." So she listened to everything that she wanted to hear, but not the second half. And she had to be informed later on that that's not exactly what he said. The next term is information overload, which this is the state of being overwhelmed by the amount of information one takes in. So I think this can go hand in hand with listening to a professor's lecture. I think since we take notes, it's because there's so much information and we don't want to be bombarded with so much information overload that we tend to forget or not listen to everything that is being said. So taking notes, it's easy to not be overwhelmed by the amount of information that one person takes in. The next term is glazing over, and this is daydreaming during the time not listening. So it's dividing your attention between listening and daydreaming. An example of this in my life is I have a roommate that loves to daydream. I swear it's her favorite pastime, but there will be times where we're having a conversation, you'll look over, and she's looking off into the distance daydreaming about something, and she didn't pick up what we were talking about or the message being spoken at hand. The next term is rebuttal tendency, and this is the tendency to disrupt listening, to internally debate a speaker's point and formulate a reply while the person is still speaking. So this is very common when it comes to political debates, and when an example of this is when you're having an argument with someone and you don't typically agree with what they're having to say. In your mind, you're already formulating what you're going to say back to them, or a rebuttal to their argument. You're trying to counteract their argument and give your point across. So this is an example of rebuttal tendency. The next term is closed-mindedness. Those two terms kind of go hand in hand because closed-mindedness is the tendency not to listen to anything with which one disagrees. So political opinions is a good example of that. I think it's easy to be closed-minded to other people's opinions when they're so strong-headed about their opinions and they don't want to listen to the other person's opinion when you know that you're right, or when you think you're right at least. So closed-mindedness is only about particular issues and not about everything. So political opinions and things like that are something that you could be closed-minded about. The next term is competitive interrupting, which is using interruptions to take control of a conversation. So interjecting or interrupting someone so that you are the focal point of that conversation and you have now taken over the conversation, which makes it so you didn't listen to what they had to say because you're too busy interrupting or interjecting the conversation that was being had. The next term is confirmation bias, and that's the tendency to pay attention only to the information that supports one's values and beliefs while discounting and ignoring the information that doesn't. So I feel like this also goes hand in hand with closed-mindedness, rebuttal tendency, and goes hand in hand with like the example of political opinions. I feel like it's easy to support the examples or the debate going on if you also agree with what they're saying. It's easy to listen to what they're saying when you agree with their values and beliefs, but when you don't agree with their values and beliefs, it's easy to close it off and choose not to listen to it. Because like I said, listening is an active process. You choose to listen to it, and you have to force yourself to listen. The last and final example is vividness effect, and that's the tendency for dramatic, shocking events to distort one's perception of reality. So our book gives a really good example of this, and it states that you can see a plane crash on the news, and then it makes it so you don't want to get on the plane. You are uneasy to get on a plane. You think that you're going to crash, but the likelihood of you actually crashing is not very likely. So this would be an example of vividness effect, because the shocking event that you saw on the news is making it so you don't want to do what was on the news. Same with a little school shootings. It's easy to see school shootings and then not want to go to school yourself. It's something very shocking, very dramatic, very sad that makes it so you don't want to go to school or go on a plane or get in a car after seeing a car crash on the news. All of those are an example of vividness effect. So these are all the terms I had for you today. Down below are 2 videos to go along with pseudo-listening and selective attention to kind of get a better understanding of those. And I hope this wasn't information overload and you got all the key terms of the common barriers to effective listening. So thanks for listening.